Maria Thompson had always been a woman of quiet determination. At 42, she worked tirelessly as a schoolteacher in Chicago, dedicating her days to nurturing young minds and helping them believe in themselves. But despite her passion for teaching, Maria often struggled with self-doubt when it came to her own life. She was overweight, something that made her feel invisible or judged in public spaces more often than not. Still, she refused to let those feelings hold her back entirely. After years of putting others first, Maria decided it was finally time for her to take a break, a much-needed vacation just for herself. It wasn't an easy decision. Money didn't come easily to Maria. Every paycheck went toward bills, groceries, and supporting her students in small but meaningful ways. Yet after months of saving pennies here and nickels there, she managed to scrape together enough for a trip to Hawaii. It would be her first real vacation in over a decade, and the thought filled her with both excitement and nerves. Traveling alone felt daunting, especially since flying had never been her strong suit. Planes were cramped, uncomfortable, and overwhelming, but this time she told herself would be different. This was her chance to step out of her comfort zone and experience something beautiful. The morning of her flight arrived sooner than expected. Dressed in her favorite floral dress and carrying a tote bag stuffed with snacks, books, and travel essentials, Maria made her way to O'Hare International Airport. Her heart pounded as she checked in her luggage and navigated through security. By the time she reached her gate, exhaustion was already setting in. The long lines, the loud announcements, and the constant rush of people moving around her left her feeling drained. But she reminded herself why she was doing this: to see turquoise waters, golden sunsets, and lush greenery. To breathe fresh air far away from the hustle of everyday life. When boarding began, Maria joined the queue, clutching her boarding pass tightly. As she approached the entrance to the plane, she noticed some passengers glancing at her, their expressions ranging from indifference to subtle judgment. She tried to ignore them, focusing instead on finding her seat. Once on board, however, things quickly took a turn for the worse. Her assigned spot was near the middle of the economy section, sandwiched between two strangers. The space felt impossibly tight, and even before sitting down, Maria could sense the challenge ahead. Her carry-on bag, though modest in size, proved difficult to stow in the overhead compartment. Balancing on tiptoes, she stretched her arms upward, struggling to lift the bag high enough. Several attempts failed, each one leaving her more flustered than the last. Passengers behind her shuffled impatiently, muttering under their breath about delays. Embarrassment crept over Maria like a heavy blanket. Just as she considered asking for help, the flight attendant assigned to assist passengers approached her. At first glance, the flight attendant seemed professional enough, dressed neatly in uniform, with a clipboard tucked under one arm. But as soon as they noticed Maria's struggle, their demeanor shifted. Instead of offering assistance, they crossed their arms and sighed loudly, rolling their eyes in exasperation. "Can we hurry this along?" the attendant snapped, their tone sharp and dismissive. "We're running late because of some people." The words hung in the air like a slap across the face. Maria froze, her cheeks burning red as tears pricked the corners of her eyes. Around her, passengers reacted in various ways. Some avoided eye contact altogether, pretending not to notice the exchange. Others exchanged smirks or whispered comments to their companions. No one stepped forward to defend Maria or offer support. Feeling utterly defeated, she finally managed to shove her bag into the compartment, nearly dropping it in the process. When she turned to sit down, the flight attendant leaned closer, speaking just loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Next time, maybe consider booking a seat that actually fits." The remark cut deeper than anything else. Maria sank into her seat, gripping the armrests tightly as shame washed over her. How could someone be so cruel? All she wanted was to enjoy her vacation, to escape the stress of daily life for a little while. Instead, she now faced the long hours of the flight, dreading further interactions with the same attendant. Every glance, every movement felt amplified, as if everyone on the plane was silently judging her. Her mind swirled with thoughts of inadequacy, wondering why she even bothered trying sometimes. But amidst the turmoil inside her head, Maria couldn't shake the hope that maybe, just maybe, something, or someone, would change the course of this terrible start to her journey. Little did she know, fate had other plans waiting in the wings. The plane roared down the runway, lifting off into the sky with a gentle shudder. Maria sat rigid in her seat, staring out the tiny window at the clouds beginning to form below. Her mind was still replaying the humiliating encounter with the flight attendant. The words echoed in her head like a broken record. Maybe consider booking a seat that actually fits. Each time they surfaced, her chest tightened, and tears threatened to spill over. She tried to distract herself by flipping through the pages of the book she'd brought along, but the letters blurred together, unreadable. Instead, she focused on taking slow, deep breaths, trying to calm the storm brewing inside her. As the initial climb leveled off, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing that they were cruising at 35,000 feet. Passengers began settling into their routines. Some pulled out laptops or tablets, others dozed off with eye masks on, and a few rummaged through their bags for snacks. But Maria remained frozen in her seat, acutely aware of every movement around her. She could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her, even though no one was actively looking in her direction. Every creak of the plane, every rustle of fabric felt magnified, as if the entire cabin was conspiring against her peace of mind. Then came the turbulence. It started subtly, a slight jolt, followed by a gentle rocking motion. For most passengers, it barely registered. They continued chatting, reading, or scrolling through their phones without concern. But for Maria, who had always been uneasy about flying, the sudden instability sent waves of panic coursing through her body. Her hands gripped the armrests so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her breathing grew shallow, and beads of sweat formed on her forehead. She closed her eyes, repeating silent mantras to herself. "You're safe. You're okay. This will pass." But the turbulence worsened. The plane dipped sharply, causing drinks to slosh in their cups and belongings to slide across tray tables. Collective gasp rippled through the cabin, and several people instinctively grabbed onto whatever was closest to steady themselves. Maria's heart raced faster than ever. She hated feeling out of control, especially in situations where escape wasn't an option. Her stomach churned and dizziness washed over her. Desperate for anything to make her feel grounded, she reached for the seatbelt buckle, fumbling with it nervously. That's when she realized something was wrong. The standard seatbelt didn't fit properly, not because of its design, but because of her size. She tugged at the ends, pulling them as far apart as they would go, but there was still a gap between the two halves. Panic surged within her. What if the turbulence got worse? What if something happened and she wasn't securely fastened? She glanced around, hoping someone nearby might notice her distress and offer help. But everyone seemed absorbed in their own worlds, too preoccupied to pay attention. Finally, swallowing her pride, Maria pressed the call button above her seat. It lit up with a soft ding, signaling that assistance was requested. Moments later, the same flight attendant who had humiliated her earlier appeared, clipboard in hand. Their expression shifted instantly upon seeing Maria, morphing from neutral professionalism to thinly veiled annoyance. "Yes?" they asked curtly, tapping their pen against the clipboard. "What is it now?" Maria hesitated, her throat dry and tight. Summoning what little courage she had left, she gestured toward her seatbelt. I'm sorry to bother you," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I need, a seatbelt extender. Could you please bring me one?" The flight attendant raised an eyebrow, their lips curling into a faint smirk. "Oh, really?" they replied, loud enough for neighboring passengers to overhear. "Didn't think about that before boarding, did you?" A ripple of stifled laughter spread through the rows closest to Maria, making her shrink further into her seat. She wanted nothing more than to disappear, to melt into the upholstery and vanish entirely. Her cheeks burned red as she forced herself to nod, unable to meet the attendant's gaze. Without another word, the flight attendant turned on their heel and walked away, returning moments later with the requested extender. They handed it to Maria with exaggerated slowness, ensuring maximum theatricality. "Here you go," they said, their tone dripping with sarcasm. "Next time, maybe check ahead of time if your seat will fit." The jab landed like a punch, to the gut. Maria mumbled a quiet thank you, her hands trembling as she fumbled to attach the extender to her seatbelt. Tears welled up in her eyes again, threatening to spill over. By now the turbulence had subsided, leaving the cabin eerily calm. Yet Maria's world felt anything but peaceful. She sat hunched forward, avoiding eye contact with anyone, wishing desperately that the flight could end right then and there. The humiliation was suffocating, and the indifference of those around her only made it worse. Not a single person stepped in to defend her or acknowledge the cruelty of the situation. It was as though she existed in a bubble of isolation, completely alone despite being surrounded by dozens of strangers. Just as Maria thought things couldn't possibly get worse, she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. Someone was standing near her row, a tall figure clad in jeans and a simple black t-shirt. At first she assumed they were just passing by, heading to the restroom or stretching their legs. But instead of walking past, the person paused, kneeling, down beside her chair. Confused, Maria glanced up and froze. It was Keanu Reeves. For a moment, disbelief clouded her thoughts. Was this real? Was the Keanu Reeves, the famously kind-hearted actor known for his humility and generosity, actually kneeling next to her? Before she could process what was happening, he spoke, his voice low and soothing. "Are you okay?" he asked, his dark eyes filled with genuine concern. Maria blinked rapidly, unsure how to respond. No one had shown her kindness since boarding the plane, let alone someone like him. Her mouth opened and closed a few times before she managed to croak out a barely audible yes. But Keanu didn't seem convinced. He studied her face carefully, noting the tear tracks streaking her cheeks and the way her hands trembled in her lap. Without missing a beat, he turned his attention to the flight attendant who had lingered nearby, watching the interaction unfold with growing unease. "This woman deserves respect," Keanu said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If you can't treat her with dignity, I'll make sure your supervisor hears about it once we land." The words hung in the air like thunder, silencing the entire cabin. Passengers craned their necks to see what was happening, some exchanging astonished glances. The flight attendant's face flushed crimson, and for the first time since takeoff they looked genuinely flustered. Stammering an apology, they backed away quickly, disappearing into the galley. Keanu stayed by Maria's side, offering her a reassuring smile. "Don't let anyone make you feel small," he said softly. "You deserve to be treated well. Always." His presence radiated warmth and sincerity, melting away the tension that had gripped Maria for hours. For the first time since stepping onto the plane, she felt seen, not as an inconvenience or a problem to be solved, but as a human being worthy of compassion. Though the flight was far from over, something inside Maria shifted in that moment. The weight of shame that had crushed her spirit began to lift, replaced by a flicker of hope. And as Keanu settled back into his seat across the aisle, occasionally glancing her way to ensure she was all right, Maria realized that sometimes grace finds us in the most unexpected places, even at 35,000 feet. Keanu Reeves's unexpected intervention had already transformed the atmosphere of the plane. The tension that had been building since Maria boarded seemed to dissipate, replaced by a stunned silence. Passengers exchanged glances, some nodding in approval, others whispering quietly about what they'd just witnessed. For Maria, however, the moment felt surreal, like stepping into a dream where someone famous and impossibly kind showed up out of nowhere to rescue her from despair. After confronting the flight attendant, Keanu didn't simply walk away. Instead, he lingered near Maria's seat, his demeanor calm but resolute. He could see the toll the ordeal had taken on her, the redness in her eyes, the way she clutched her hands together nervously, as if bracing herself for another wave of cruelty. Without hesitation, he knelt down again, lowering himself to her level so their conversation would feel intimate and safe. "Hey," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that made Maria's heart ache with gratitude. I know this is probably overwhelming right now, but you're going to be okay." His words were simple, yet they carried immense weight. They weren't empty platitudes or generic reassurances. They came from a place of genuine empathy, as though Keanu truly understood how it felt to be mistreated or underestimated. Maria blinked back tears, unsure how to respond. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined being comforted by someone like him, someone whose face she recognized from movies, interviews, and memes celebrating his kindness. Yet here he was, not as a distant celebrity but as a compassionate human being who saw her pain and refused to ignore it. I don't even know what to say," Maria admitted finally, her voice trembling. "Thank you for standing up for me. No one else has ever done that before." Keanu smiled gently, leaning slightly closer to ensure she heard him clearly over the hum of the plane's engines. "You shouldn't have to thank anyone for treating you with basic decency," he replied. "What happened to you wasn't right, it wasn't fair. But sometimes people forget that we're all just trying our best, you know? We're all fighting battles no one else can see." His words struck a chord deep within Maria. She nodded slowly, feeling a lump rise in her throat. It was true. She was fighting battles, ones she rarely spoke about. The constant self-doubt, the judgmental stares, the internalized shame, all of it weighed heavily on her shoulders every single day. And yet, hearing Keanu acknowledge those struggles, without knowing anything specific about her life, made her feel less alone. For several minutes, Keanu stayed by her side, engaging her in light conversation to help ease the lingering discomfort. He asked about her trip, curious to learn why she was flying to Hawaii. Maria hesitated at first, still processing the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. But eventually, she opened up. She told him about her teaching job, her love for connecting with students, and how she hoped this vacation would give her a chance to recharge after years of putting everyone else first. "That sounds amazing," Keanu said sincerely, his admiration evident. "Teaching is such an important job. It shapes the future, one kid at a time. You must be really good at it." Maria blushed, unused to receiving compliments, especially from someone like him. "I try my best," she murmured modestly. "But sometimes it feels like no matter how hard I work, I'm not enough, like today." Her voice trailed off, the memory of the flight attendant's cruel remarks creeping back into her mind. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his expression softening. "Listen to me," he said firmly, but kindly. "None of this has anything to do with your worth. What happened earlier? That says more about them than it does about you. People act cruelly because they're afraid or insecure. It has nothing to do with who you are as a person. Don't let their negativity define you." Maria felt tears pricking her eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of validation. For the first time in hours, or maybe even longer, she allowed herself to believe that she deserved kindness, respect, and understanding. And sitting there beside her, Keanu embodied all of those qualities effortlessly. As the conversation continued, Keanu began asking more personal questions, genuinely interested in getting to know Maria beyond the surface-level details. He learned about her passion for reading, her favorite authors, and the types of books she liked to recommend to her students. Their shared love for storytelling sparked a natural connection between them, turning what could have been a fleeting interaction into something meaningful. At one point, Maria laughed, a real, heartfelt laugh, for the first time since boarding the plane. It startled her at first, breaking through the haze of anxiety and humiliation that had clouded her thoughts for hours. But once it came, it felt liberating, like a tiny crack of sunlight piercing through a stormy sky. Keanu grinned when he heard it, clearly pleased to see her spirits lifting. "You've got a great laugh," he remarked casually, his tone light and teasing. "You should use it more often." Maria chuckled again, shaking her head in disbelief. "I can't believe this is happening," she confessed. "I mean, you, and here you are talking to me like we're old friends." Keanu shrugged, his smile widening. Why wouldn't I? Everyone deserves to be treated like they matter. Fame doesn't make me any better than anyone else. It just gives me a platform to remind people of that. His humility only endeared him further to Maria. She realized then that Keanu wasn't performing an act of charity or seeking attention for his actions. He was simply being himself, kind, thoughtful, and deeply human. In a world that often felt cold and indifferent, his presence was a reminder that goodness still existed, even in the most unlikely places. Before long, Keanu glanced at his watch, realizing they'd been chatting for quite a while. "I should probably let you rest," he said apologetically, "but before I go, I want to do something for you." Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone and tapped on the screen a few times. Then, handing it to Maria, he explained what he was doing. "I've arranged for you to get a complimentary upgrade to business class on your return flight," he said matter-of-factly, as though it were the most normal thing in the world. "You deserve to be treated well, not just today but always. Consider this my way of making sure your trip ends on a high note." Maria stared at him, utterly speechless. Her mind raced, trying to process what he'd just said. An upgrade? Complimentary? How could anyone, even someone as generous as Keanu, pull that off so easily? Yet there it was, confirmed in a text message displayed on his phone. Her name, her flight details, and a confirmation number. I don't know what to say," Maria stammered, her voice thick with emotion. "This is too much. You've already done so much for me." Keanu waved off her protests with a dismissive gesture. "Don't worry about it," he insisted. "It's just a small gesture. Besides, you've earned it. You put up with a lot today, and you handled it with grace. That takes strength." Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks once more, but this time they were accompanied by a radiant smile. She couldn't remember the last time someone had gone out of their way to make her feel valued and appreciated. Keanu's actions weren't just generous. They were transformative, reminding her that kindness could change lives in profound ways. As Keanu returned to his seat across the aisle, Maria sat back in her chair, clutching his phone tightly in her hands. The cabin buzzed with quiet energy, passengers stealing glances at the two of them, clearly intrigued by the unfolding drama. Some whispered excitedly about Keanu's intervention, while others simply watched in awe, marveling at the actor's genuine compassion. For Maria, however, the focus wasn't on the spectacle, it was on the profound shift within herself. In the span of a single conversation, she had gone from feeling invisible and unworthy to empowered and seen. Keanu hadn't just stood up for her, he had reminded her of her own worth, planting seeds of confidence that would continue to grow long after the flight ended. And as the plane soared through the clouds, carrying its passengers toward their respective destinations, Maria realized that this journey was about far more than reaching Hawaii. It was about discovering strength she didn't know she had, and finding grace in the most unexpected form. The rest of the flight passed in a blur for Maria. After Keanu returned to his seat, she found herself replaying their conversation over and over in her mind. Every word he'd said, every gesture of kindness, felt like a lifeline pulling her out of the darkness she'd been drowning in earlier. She couldn't stop thinking about how effortlessly he had stepped in, not just to defend her, but to remind her of her value as a person. For someone who spent so much of her life feeling overlooked, it was an experience unlike anything she'd ever known. As the plane cruised steadily toward Hawaii, passengers resumed their usual routines. Some napped, others watched movies on their screens, and a few chatted quietly with their seatmates. But the energy in the cabin had shifted noticeably since Keanu's intervention. The flight attendant who had mistreated Maria avoided coming near her row altogether, clearly shaken by the actor's sharp words. Meanwhile, other passengers began glancing at Maria with newfound curiosity, and perhaps even guilt. It was as if they were seeing her differently now, realizing that the woman they'd silently judged or ignored earlier was someone deserving of respect and compassion. For Maria, however, the change wasn't just external, it was internal. The weight that had pressed down on her chest for hours finally lifted, replaced by a sense of calm she hadn't felt in ages. She leaned back in her seat, letting out a long breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her hands, which had trembled uncontrollably during the turbulence, now rested peacefully in her lap. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to imagine what lay ahead: golden beaches, crystal-clear waters, and the promise of adventure. Keanu's act of kindness had reignited something inside her, a spark of hope that reminded her why she'd embarked on this trip in the first place. But the story didn't end there. Unbeknownst to Maria, another passenger sitting nearby had been watching the entire scene unfold with growing admiration. This passenger, a young woman named Clara, was traveling home after attending a photography conference. An aspiring journalist with a knack for storytelling, Clara couldn't help but feel moved by what she'd witnessed. Here was a Hollywood star, someone whose fame could have easily insulated him from the struggles of ordinary people, choosing to stand up for a stranger in need. To Clara, it felt like a moment straight out of a movie, except this time, it was real. Compelled to share the story, Clara pulled out her phone and began typing furiously. She crafted a detailed post describing everything she'd seen: the mistreatment Maria endured at the hands of the flight attendant, Keanu's courageous intervention, and the profound impact it seemed to have on everyone around them. Clara wrote, with care, ensuring her tone remained respectful, while highlighting the importance of empathy and standing up against injustice. Before hitting post, she hesitated briefly, wondering whether anyone would care about a random encounter on a plane. But deep down, she believed the world needed more stories like this, stories that celebrated humanity at its best. Within minutes of posting, Clara's words began spreading like wildfire. Social media users, hungry for uplifting content amid the chaos of daily news cycles, latched onto the story with enthusiasm. Comments poured in, praising Keanu for his kindness and expressing outrage over the flight attendant's behavior. Hashtags like "Stand with Maria" and "Ours Kindness" in action started trending, drawing attention from people across the globe. News outlets picked up the story shortly afterward, turning what had been a private moment into a public celebration of compassion and resilience. Back on the plane, Maria remained blissfully unaware of the viral storm brewing around her. When the aircraft touched down in Honolulu, she gathered her belongings and prepared to disembark, still basking in the warmth of Keanu's actions. As she stepped off the plane, the tropical breeze greeted her with open arms, carrying the scent of salt water and hibiscus flowers. For a moment she paused, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. This was exactly where she wanted to be, a place far removed from the stress and judgment of everyday life. It wasn't until later that evening, while checking into her hotel room, that Maria discovered the extent of the story's reach. Exhausted from the long journey, she decided to scroll through social media before bed, hoping to unwind. What she found instead left her speechless. Dozens of notifications flooded her screen, all linked to posts about her encounter with Keanu. At first, she assumed it was some kind of mix-up or coincidence. How could strangers possibly know what had happened on the flight? But as she scrolled further, she realized the truth. Someone had shared her story, and the internet had embraced it wholeheartedly. Maria sat cross-legged on her hotel bed, scrolling. Through the comments section of one particularly popular post, people from all walks of life were sharing their thoughts, many expressing gratitude for the reminder that kindness still existed in the world. Some recounted their own experiences of being mistreated due to their size or appearance, thanking Maria for having the courage to endure such treatment gracefully. Others praised Keanu, calling him a hero and urging others to follow his example. Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she read through the messages. She had never imagined that her personal struggle could resonate with so many people, or that it might inspire others to reflect on their own capacity for compassion. For years she had felt invisible, as though her voice didn't matter. Now suddenly thousands of people were listening, not just to her story but to the message behind it, that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their circumstances. The next morning, Maria woke up feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The sun streamed through the curtains of her hotel room, casting golden beams across the floor. She dressed quickly, eager to explore the island and soak in its beauty. Stepping outside, she marveled at the vibrant colors surrounding her, the lush greenery, the sparkling ocean, the vivid hues of tropical flowers. Everything seemed brighter, richer, more alive. It was as if the events of the previous day had given her permission to see the world, and herself, in a new light. Over the course of her vacation, Maria made a conscious effort to embrace every moment fully. She snorkeled among colorful coral reefs, hiked through rainforests bursting with wildlife, and watched breathtaking sunsets paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Each experience filled her with a sense of wonder and gratitude, reinforcing the idea that life was meant to be lived boldly and joyfully, and whenever doubts crept back in, she reminded herself of Keanu's words. "You deserve to be treated well, always." By the time her trip came to an end, Maria felt transformed. The woman who had boarded the plane to Hawaii, nervous, self-conscious, and weighed down by years of insecurity, was no longer the same person. In her place stood someone stronger, more confident, and deeply aware of her worth. As she packed her bags and prepared to head to the airport for her return flight, she reflected on the journey she'd taken, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. When she arrived at the gate for her flight home, Maria noticed something different immediately. A representative from the airline approached her with a warm smile, introducing themselves and apologizing profusely for the treatment she had received on her outbound journey. They explained that the company had launched an investigation into the incident, resulting in the termination of the offending flight attendant. Additionally, they assured her that steps were being taken to improve staff training and ensure such behavior wouldn't happen again. Maria accepted their apology graciously, appreciating the effort, but feeling no lingering bitterness. Instead, she focused on the positive changes sparked by her experience. Thanks to Clara's post and the subsequent media coverage, countless conversations about body shaming, empathy, and accountability had emerged worldwide. Airlines, businesses, and individuals alike were reevaluating their attitudes and practices, inspired by the simple yet powerful act of standing up for someone in need. As she boarded her return flight, Maria couldn't help but smile when she saw her name printed on the boarding pass, business class. True to his word, Keanu had arranged the upgrade, ensuring her journey home would be comfortable and stress-free. Settling into her plush seat, she gazed out the window at the clouds, drifting lazily below. For the first time in her life, Maria felt truly unstoppable, an ordinary woman whose courage and resilience had touched the hearts of millions. And as the plane ascended into the sky, carrying her back to Chicago, Maria knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. When Maria returned to Chicago, she expected life to go back to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after such a transformative experience. But the ripple effects of her encounter with Keanu Reeves and the viral story that followed were far from over. What started as a single act of kindness on a plane had grown into something much larger, touching lives across the globe and inspiring countless conversations about empathy, respect, and self-worth. The morning after landing, Maria woke up in her cozy apartment, sunlight streaming through the blinds. She brewed herself a cup of coffee and sat down at her kitchen table, scrolling through her phone to catch up on messages. Her inbox was flooded, not just with emails but also texts, comments, and direct messages from people she'd never met. Some thanked her for sharing her story, while others opened up about their own struggles with body shaming or mistreatment in public spaces. One message stood out in particular. "Your courage has inspired me to speak up when I feel invisible." "Thank you." Maria felt a lump rise in her throat as she read those words. She had always thought of herself as an ordinary person, someone whose actions wouldn't make waves. Yet here she was, being told that her experience had given others the strength to stand up for themselves. It was both humbling and empowering, a reminder that even the smallest moments of bravery could have a profound impact. As the days passed, the media attention continued to grow. Local news stations reached out to interview her, eager to hear her perspective on the incident and its aftermath. At first, Maria hesitated. The idea of speaking publicly about something so personal made her nervous. But then she remembered Keanu's words. You deserve to be treated well, always. If she stayed silent now, wouldn't that undermine the very message she wanted to share? With newfound determination, she agreed to sit down for interviews, using the platform to advocate for kindness and inclusivity. During one particularly memorable appearance on a morning talk show, Maria recounted the events of the flight with honesty and grace. She spoke candidly about how the flight attendant's remarks had hurt her, not because they were especially unique, but because they echoed years of societal judgment she'd internalized. It's not just about what happened on that plane, she explained. It's about the way we treat each other every day. In stores, on buses, in classrooms. We all carry insecurities, and sometimes we forget that our words can either heal or harm. Her vulnerability resonated deeply with viewers. Calls poured into the station during the live broadcast, with listeners praising Maria for her courage and thanking her for shining a light on issues many had long considered taboo. By the end of the segment, the host presented Maria with a standing ovation, calling her a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt unseen or undervalued. Word of Maria's advocacy soon spread beyond local media. National outlets picked up her story, amplifying her message to an even wider audience. Articles appeared in major newspapers, podcasts invited her to share her insights, and social media influencers began reposting clips of her interviews. Through it all, Maria remained grounded, focusing less on fame and more on the opportunity to create meaningful change. She knew this moment wasn't about her, it was about the broader conversation she was helping to spark. Back in her classroom, Maria noticed a shift among her students too. They greeted her with extra enthusiasm, some shyly asking if they could hug her before class started. When she asked why they seemed so excited, several admitted they'd seen her on TV or online. Rather than feeling embarrassed, Maria used the moment to teach them an important lesson. Standing in front of the chalkboard, she wrote 2 words in bold letters: kindness matters. For every person who chooses to be kind, she told her students, there's someone out there who desperately needs to hear it. You don't have to be famous or rich to make a difference. Sometimes all it takes is a smile, a kind word, or simply treating someone the way you'd want to be treated yourself. The kids listened intently, their young faces lighting up as they absorbed the message. Afterward, many approached her desk to share stories of times they'd been bullied or excluded, and how hearing her story gave them hope that things could get better. Maria hugged each child, promising them that their worth was never defined by what others said about them. Watching their eyes fill with confidence reminded her why she loved teaching in the first place. Outside of work, Maria found herself connecting with people in ways she never imagined. Strangers stopped her in grocery stores or coffee shops to express gratitude for her courage. Online communities dedicated to body positivity and mental health welcomed her as an honorary member, inviting her to join panels and discussions aimed at fostering understanding and acceptance. Though these interactions kept her busy, they also filled her with purpose. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. One evening, as Maria scrolled through her email, she came across a message that brought tears to her eyes. It was from Clara, the passenger who had posted about the incident on social media. In the note, Clara apologized for not introducing herself on the plane, but expressed how grateful she was to have witnessed such a powerful moment. I hope you know, Clara wrote, that your story didn't just inspire me. It reminded me why I became a journalist in the first place, to tell stories that matter, stories that challenge us to be better humans. Maria replied immediately, thanking Clara for having the courage to share her experience. Their exchange marked the beginning of a friendship that would span months, with the 2 women bonding over their shared belief in the power of storytelling to drive positive change. Together, they brainstormed ideas for projects that combined Maria's passion for education with Clara's talent for writing, including a potential book collaboration about overcoming adversity and finding strength in vulnerability. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves' role in the story continued to earn widespread praise. Fans celebrated his actions as further proof of the humility and generosity he was known for off-screen. Memes and fan art depicting him as a real-life superhero circulated online with captions like "Keanu saves the day." Again, even late-night talk show hosts joked about adding flight attendant mediator to his lengthy list of accomplishments. Despite the attention, Keanu remained characteristically humble. In a rare interview, he deflected credit, insisting that his actions were nothing extraordinary. "Anyone would have done the same," he said with a shrug. "It's not about me, it's about remembering that we're all human beings deserving of respect. If my stepping in helped remind people of that, then great. But the real hero is Maria. She showed incredible strength throughout everything." When Maria heard about his comments, she smiled, touched by his generosity. Though they hadn't spoken since the flight, she often thought about him and the impact his kindness had on her life. Knowing that he believed in her made her feel unstoppable, as though no obstacle was too big to overcome. As weeks turned into months, Maria embraced her new role as an advocate for compassion and resilience. She started volunteering at local community centers, leading workshops designed to empower individuals struggling with self-doubt or societal pressures. She collaborated with schools to develop programs focused on empathy and inclusion, ensuring that future generations grew up valuing kindness above all else. And perhaps most importantly, she began blogging, sharing her thoughts, experiences, and lessons learned with a growing audience hungry for authenticity. Through it all, Maria carried the memory of that fateful flight close to her heart. It wasn't just the humiliation or the turbulence she remembered, it was the humanity she encountered along the way. From Keanu's intervention to Clara's courage in sharing her story, every piece of the puzzle had contributed to something beautiful. A single act of kindness had sparked a chain reaction, proving that even in our darkest moments, grace can find us when we least expect it. And as Maria looked out her window one evening, watching the city lights twinkle below, she realized something profound. The world wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But together, with compassion, understanding, and unwavering belief in one another, they could build something truly extraordinary. Months had passed since Maria's life-changing flight to Hawaii, but the impact of that day continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways she could never have anticipated. The whirlwind of media attention had slowed down, giving her time to reflect on everything that had happened. What started as a personal struggle, being mistreated and humiliated on an airplane, had transformed into a global conversation about kindness, empathy, and the importance of standing up for others. For Maria, this journey wasn't just about surviving adversity. It was about thriving despite it, using her experience to inspire positive change. One crisp autumn morning, Maria stood outside a community center in Chicago, clutching a notebook filled with ideas for her latest workshop. She had titled it, "Finding Your Voice, Turning Pain into Power," a reflection of her own transformation over the past months. Inside, rows of chairs were arranged neatly, waiting for participants who would soon arrive eager to learn how to overcome self-doubt and embrace their worth. As she looked around the room, decorated with motivational posters and colorful artwork created by local students, Maria felt a surge of pride. This was her purpose now, to help others find strength in vulnerability and confidence in their uniqueness. The workshop began with introductions, each participant sharing a little about themselves and why they'd come. Some were young adults struggling with body image issues, while others were older individuals seeking tools to combat feelings of invisibility in a fast-paced world. A few admitted they'd been inspired by Maria's story after seeing it online or hearing about it through friends. Listening to them speak, Maria realized how universal these struggles were, and how powerful it could be to create a safe space where people felt seen and heard. Throughout the session, Maria shared practical tips and heartfelt advice, drawing from both her teaching background and her personal experiences. She encouraged everyone to practice self-compassion, reminding them that they deserved love and respect simply because they existed. "You don't need to prove your worth to anyone," she said firmly. "It's not something you earn, it's something you're born with." Her words resonated deeply, sparking nods and murmurs of agreement throughout the room. What made the workshop truly special, however, was the sense of connection that blossomed among attendees. By the end of the day, strangers had become allies, exchanging contact information and promising to support one another moving forward. Watching this unfold, Maria felt a quiet joy wash over her. This was what mattered most, not fame or recognition, but the knowledge that she had helped foster a community rooted in kindness and understanding. Later that week, Maria received an email that brought tears to her eyes. It was from Keanu Reeves. Though they hadn't spoken since the flight, he had kept tabs on her advocacy work through news articles and social media updates. In his message, he thanked her for reminding him why small acts of kindness mattered so much. "Sometimes we forget how interconnected we all are," he wrote. "Your courage has inspired me to keep looking for opportunities to make a difference, no matter how big or small." Maria read the letter several times, savoring every word. To think that her actions had inspired someone like Keanu, who already seemed to embody goodness and humility, was almost too much to comprehend. Yet it reinforced a truth she'd come to believe wholeheartedly. Kindness was contagious. When one person chose to act with compassion, it created a ripple effect, inspiring others to do the same. Inspired by Keanu's note, Maria decided to reach out to Clara, the passenger whose viral post had sparked the initial wave of attention. Together, they brainstormed ideas for expanding Maria's advocacy efforts. One idea quickly rose to the top: writing a book. They envisioned it as part memoir, part guidebook. A collection of stories highlighting moments of grace and resilience, interspersed with actionable steps readers could take to cultivate empathy and confidence in their own lives. Over the following months, Maria and Clara collaborated closely, pouring their hearts into the project. Maria drew from her own experiences, weaving tales of triumph and heartache into a narrative designed to uplift and empower. Clara, with her journalistic expertise, helped shape the manuscript into a cohesive and compelling story. Along the way, they interviewed dozens of people who had reached out to Maria after hearing her story, incorporating their voices into the book to underscore the universality of the themes. When the finished product finally hit shelves under the title "Grace at 35,000 feet, Finding Strength in Unexpected Places," it became an instant bestseller. Readers praised its honesty, warmth, and practical wisdom, hailing it as a beacon of hope in uncertain times. Bookstores hosted signing events, where Maria met fans who shared how her words had touched their lives. One woman tearfully recounted how the book had given her the courage to leave an abusive relationship. Another described how it had motivated her to start volunteering at a shelter for homeless youth. Each story reinforced Maria's belief that storytelling had the power to heal and transform. Beyond the success of the book, Maria's influence continued to grow. Schools invited her to give keynote speeches at assemblies. Corporations hired her to lead workshops on workplace inclusivity, and nonprofits sought her guidance on building programs focused on mental health awareness. Through it all, she remained grounded, always remembering the lesson she'd learned on that fateful flight. True fulfillment came not from accolades or achievements, but from making a difference in the lives of others. As the years went by, Maria's legacy only deepened. Her blog gained thousands of followers, becoming a trusted resource for anyone navigating challenges related to self-esteem, body positivity, or societal judgment. She launched a podcast called Chasing Grace, where she interviewed thought leaders, activists, and everyday heroes about their journeys toward resilience and compassion. And perhaps most rewarding of all, she stayed connected with many of the people whose lives she'd touched, whether through workshops, interviews, or chance encounters, forming friendships that enriched her life immeasurably. Looking back on everything she'd accomplished, Maria often marveled at how far she'd come. The shy, self-conscious woman who had boarded that plane to Hawaii felt like a distant memory now. In her place stood someone bold, compassionate, and unapologetically herself. Yet she knew none of this would have been possible without the chain reaction set off by a single act of kindness, from Keanu stepping in when she needed it most, to Clara amplifying her story, to countless strangers choosing to listen and engage. On a quiet evening years later, Maria sat on her porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. Beside her lay a stack of letters from readers students, and workshop participants, each expressing gratitude for the role she'd played in their lives. As she flipped through them, smiling at familiar names and heartfelt messages, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Life hadn't always been easy, and there were still days when doubt crept in. But she had learned to face those moments head-on, armed with the knowledge that grace could be found even in the darkest places. And so, as twilight settled over the city and stars began to twinkle in the sky, Maria whispered a silent thank you to Keanu, to Clara, to the passengers on that plane, and to the universe itself, for showing her that even when the world felt cruel, there was always room for kindness, for proving that one person's courage could spark a movement, and for reminding her, time and again, that everyone deserved to be treated well, always.